so I guess we'll begin with our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. As you know, tonight is a special meeting to talk about the potential conversion of the junior high school into a middle school by bringing the sixth grades over to the middle school. So we're going to begin with the approval of the agenda.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead. I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So I'm going to hand it over to you, Andy, for the beginning.
Yeah, so we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so giving a little bit of an overview of what we've spent the last few special meetings doing. And then we'll have an opportunity, we really, as I know this board is seeking public input, and so we'll actually have the public comment or public hearing section after that review. So I do hope everyone saw, Kathy, where did we have the handouts?
Out in the lobby.
Okay, so if anyone doesn't have any of the handouts, we are going to be reviewing a few of those. So we encourage you to grab them from the lobby. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just that first board meeting that we held in February. Few key takeaways that I want to emphasize, and then the real star of the show tonight is actually Dr. Knox, our assistant superintendent, who's going to be talking about the middle school concept and helping educate on what we really are envisioning the potential future scenario could be here at Matilaha. So the couple items to highlight from the first board meeting discussing the potential move of sixth grade to Matilaha. And for those board members, we're talking about the last few pages of your materials. We have them in chronological order. So that begins page 23 of 32. I'm sorry, it's actually a few pages earlier. So the first thing that we started off with was reminding the board as well as the community that we actually assembled a 20-person committee made up of administrators, faculty, and parents back in 2014 to look at the possibility of moving the sixth grade at that time. What we came to find out at our last meeting was actually there was also a very serious look in this district back around 2002 to potentially move the sixth grade, so certainly not a new issue. That committee in 2014 met for a total of 5 meetings looking at, they actually had administrators from other school districts coming and discussing the concept with them and what it means not just to house an additional grade cohort or an additional group of students at a site, but what it really means to transition from a junior high to a middle school concept and some of the things that go along with that. Ultimately, the committee, which initially took a kind of a straw poll and said that they were split fairly evenly between support for the concept or not, by that final meeting, it was 17-3 in favor of making the transition, believing that the best way to educate our middle school age children is in a 6th through 8th grade concept. However, at that time, remember back in 2014, as our faculty in the audience know, we were still very firmly in furlough days. And so we had a very challenging fiscal condition, very challenging budget. And so the committee was told that the cost at the time to make the transition was going to be about $150,000 ongoing per year. And they were asked, given that financial cost, do you believe that now would be the right time to make that transition? And the committee pretty strongly said, no, this wouldn't be the right time. Even though we think that's the right overall configuration, now is not the right time until we have our faculty finally receiving a raise after about 9 years of just furlough days, which are in essence reductions in salary. During school years, we were having less than the full 180-day instructional calendar. That just wasn't the time to be taking on a new expense. So that was really the committee's findings. We had a few committee members come and speak to us in February on that. The next thing that we had at that meeting was a great presentation from our administrators here at Matilaha, Javier Ramirez and Carol Paquette, talking about the strengths that we currently have at Matilaha, and what things might look like as we look toward a smaller future as far as the size of each of our grades. And so if you do have the materials with you, I'd point your attention to our enrollment projection. We went into a lot of detail on that enrollment projection at the meeting. So I'm not going to go too heavily into it now, but for the board members, that's page 26 of 32. What's really important, though, is to see Matilaha just last year was a school of about 450 students. Historically, it was actually over 700, and I know that we have a few former students in the audience, and so perhaps you remember when it was a bit larger. What we're looking at this current year is about 400 students, and what we're looking at in just a very short future is going down and being a school site of only about 325 or so students, 330 students, if we remain at 7th and 8th grade. And so our administrators talked about what potential challenges might that create as far as offering of electives, of extracurriculars, and other sorts of enrichment opportunities at the school. If we are looking at an overall decline in enrollment of another 20 to 25% after already dropping nearly 50%, obviously that's significant. So again, we won't go too much into detail on this, but really what we're looking at is that we have 5 straight years of incoming classes that hover around 160 students. And so if we assume that down the road, a few years from now, we'll have 3, if we were to make the transition of 6th, 7th, and 8th here at Matilaha, we'd be looking at about 480 students, 160, 160, 160. So we're actually only looking at, even with the transition of 6th grade to Matilaha, looking at a configuration only slightly larger than where we were just last year. That's how significant the continued decline in enrollment still is. Just a reminder for everyone in the audience, our decline is not coming, if you look at this information, it doesn't come from we all of a sudden lose a bunch of 3rd graders when they become 4th graders, or families moving out of the area in significant numbers once they're in the district. The number one factor of whether or not you're a 1st grader with us next year is if you're in kindergarten this year. So when you look at our decline in enrollment, it all comes from that incoming kindergarten size relative to the outgoing senior class size. And so that really is where you see the biggest change in enrollment. Okay? So the last thing that we, really the significant piece that we hit on in that first meeting was that fiscal component, because recall, that was the key hang-up back in 2014 of saying if we were going to consider this move, which we believe would be the right configuration, at least at that point, would be the $150,000 price tag. What we've looked at is that we really don't believe that's actually an accurate representation of the cost if we were to make this transition going forward. Both because we actually have current cost in excess of $40,000 for housing 6th grade at the elementary schools. That comes in the form of extra math support at the elementary sites when we have combination grades across a number of our sites. It also comes from other hourly support, again, because there's a distinct curriculum in the 6th grade level separate from kindergarten through 5th, and so those combination classes. We also were looking at the reality that as we continue to decline, part of the staffing that would support the middle school concept would come from our own staff currently at Matilaha. So it's not actually new staffing that would be required, but rather being able to just to repurpose or to refocus some of our current staffing to be able to provide that support in electives and other core content areas. So we do not believe at all that the figure is $150,000. We believe it's actually very neutral relative to where we are currently. There might be a slight amount of savings that would otherwise come to the district if we didn't make the transition, but again, there's really no new expense going forward that would be coming, netting out from this transition. Okay, so those were kind of the key high points of that first meeting on February 15th. And now we're going to hand it over to Dr. Knox to discuss the more recent meeting and talk about what we really believe is the more compelling reason to be considering this transition, which is not, you know, the enrollment projection by itself or the financials by itself, but really about what's gained for our students by potentially making this transition.
Great, so I'm actually going to do my presentation from down there because I have a PowerPoint and we've saved you guys some seats if you'd like to sit down there while I do my portion. Do I need to do anything? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to review some information that the committee looked at back in 2014 and was really one of the driving force behind them meeting again and also choosing, coming to consensus that it was a superior model for us to move our sixth graders to Matilaha to join the seventh and eighth graders. So one big thing that happened in 2010 is that our state adopted the Common Core state standards, which was a new set of standards. And a key factor there is that the way the standards were created, it was really with the idea in mind that most schools are set up as a K-5 configuration, and then a 6th through 8th, and then a 9th through 12th configuration. And so when they actually created the standards, there's a shift from less informational text and then more informational text as kids move into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And part of the language arts standards are taught through the science and the history. So it's important to understand that what we're dealing with now as educators is a set of standards that were designed with this in mind. As well in math, this is the case. You can see from this slide how there's a band of standards that span K through 2, and then 3 through 5, and then it's very different as students enter 6th grade. The math standards are much closer to 7th grade, and you can see that that was on purpose as they designed it. So when we're looking at curriculum, this really matters because the differences between 6th grade and 5th grade are really quite great. So one of the things that is happening currently is if you're a 6th grade teacher on an elementary campus, you are teaching different things than your K through 5 counterparts. We had a situation when we went to adopt our math program a few years back. We looked at all of the different curriculum that was available, and the vast majority of it was designed with K through 5 in mind, so a program and a publisher designed program for K through 5, and then a separate program for 6 through 8. And so when we adopted, what we ended up doing was we liked Bridges, which was the program that we adopted, was K through 5, and that left our 6th grade teachers to choose CMP3, which at the time was the program that Matilaha had adopted for 7th and 8th grade. So it's really difficult as a classroom teacher to get to know your curriculum. Curriculum is not just one book that you get. In fact, when Bridges was delivered, we were shocked. It came with like 6 boxes of all kinds of pieces of materials, all sorts of components, all sorts of supplemental pieces. And so as a teacher, it takes you a good year before you're really familiar with your curriculum, and certainly a couple years to really understand all the different components and use them well. So to try to do that for 2 separate programs and from 2 separate publishers, this is really challenging. So for example, one of the additional costs that our district is currently facing is that we knew that we were never going to be able to ask our teachers that teach in a 5th, 6th grade combo class to get to know both curricula. That would be really difficult. And so what we're doing currently is paying supplemental teachers to come in and do the math separately for either 6th or 5th in our combination classes. And so what we're seeing for the future is that this is going to continue to be an issue for us because of the way Common Core was designed, and now because of the way the publishing companies are coming forward with materials. So currently, we've gone through our cycle for our math adoption and our language arts adoption. This year is the beginning of our social studies adoption. And the way that works is the state board approves curriculum that then districts can choose from to adopt. So I pulled up the CDE website, and these are the approved materials for social studies. And so we just actually took a team of teachers down to VCOE in Camarillo and looked through, well, we received presentations from the publishers and then looked through the library to peruse the curriculum. But what you can see here is as you look at the title of the curriculum off to the side in parentheses, it'll say 6 through 8 or K through 5, right? And there's only a couple here that are K through 6. So as we continue to adopt curriculum in the future, what we're finding is that everything is designed, again, with K-5 in mind and then 6-8 in mind as a separate school system. So it's going to limit our options a little bit in the future. After we do the social studies adoption, the next thing that we'll be adopting is science curriculum. After Common Core rolled out, we then received our new set of science standards. It's called Next Generation Science. And again, I'm on the CDE website here, so you can just see that, again, the way it's been designed or laid out, even at the top here, it says learning progressions for elementary K-5, middle 6-8, and then high school 9-12. And so when we look at how they're arranging the components, we can see that it's going to continue to happen. Now, the publishers haven't caught up with next generation science standards. Publishing companies are currently working on curriculum, and in the near future, our state board will adopt, approve the curriculum that we can choose from. And then again, I believe we're going to find ourselves in the same conundrum where it's going to be very difficult for our 6th grade teachers on elementary campuses because of the way they're designing these things. So that was one really key factor, especially when it comes to collaboration amongst teachers, which is something I'm really passionate about. Again, your limitations in the ability to collaborate, especially think about some of our school sites that only have one 6th grade teacher. So they don't have any other 6th grade counterpart, and then they can't really even have conversations with 5th and 4th grade teachers when it comes to the curriculum they're using because they're completely different programs. So those are things that were obviously considered. The next thing that I want to talk about, our committee did discuss a vision at the time for what they would want to do at Matilaha if the 6th graders were moved back in 2014. And there was discussion that was brought up, an advisory period, things of that nature. But now that we're 4 years later down the road, Javier Ramirez and Carol Paquette, the administrators at Matilaha, are here to help answer questions and be available. They and we got together and really sat down and thought through what is our vision? You know, it's 4 years later, and we want to make sure that we're, doing the best possible things here at the middle school, not only now with our 7th and 8th graders, but also indeed if we move our 6th graders here. And I have to say, I really was not as aware of this as I should have been, but there was quite a bit of research done back in the 70s, 80s, and then a little bit in the 90s. Unfortunately, the discussion was dropped, and a lot of the committees no longer existed because there was a big movement towards standards-based instruction and accountability and testing. But before that, before those committees formed and before those discussions happened, there were decades of research that went into how do we best educate this group of kids. You know, when you have kids that are in this 11 through 14 age group, what are they going through? What are their needs? What do we need to focus on? And that was the foundation of all these committee meetings for decades. And out of that came this idea called the middle school concept. And when I started to look into this more and have conversations with Javier and Carol, and now conversations with our elementary teachers, we are really excited about bringing some of these components to Matilaha. Some of them currently exist here, but we really want to move forward in bringing more of these components because we really absolutely do think it's in the best interest of this age group. We talk in terms of a junior high or a middle school, and it has less to do with the grade span and more to do with the concept of what that means as far as what happens on a campus. And when junior highs were created, they were really created with the idea that, okay, these kids have to go to high school, so we're just going to create a school system for slightly younger students, but with the sense of high school in mind. And during these decades of discussion, that's where the shift changed, and we started to bring in the research and the information as to actually what is actually better for this age group. They actually don't need what high schoolers need. And so those shifts began to happen. You can see kind of this is a nice model here to see where the major shifts were. High schools and therefore junior highs tend to be much more subject oriented, where the focus for middle schools was to be more student oriented, right? It's about the whole child, and really bringing those children in as our children, and we're gonna help them through all of the components of what they're going through during these years. The big shift was away from just simply cognitive development and academics, and a real balance between cognitive and affective development. So a real focus on bringing in social and emotional well-being, social and emotional development. And I'll talk a little bit about how they really did that and fed that into the program. Also, the idea was that teachers should be teaming together and taking different subject matter like history and language arts and science and doing more interdisciplinary themed units and more experiential learning opportunities, which we do a little bit at Matilah, but we certainly see it a lot in our elementary schools and in our 6th grade. We see our kids do Egypt Day and Greek Day and Caveman Day, and they dress up and they do these sort of simulations of events, and those are the things that really are best for this age group, and we want to make sure that it is happening in a more robust way. Some of the recommendation called for block scheduling and flexible scheduling, which we've talked about as potentially being able to bring here. Also, a lot of exploratory classes. One of the benefits of potentially moving 6th grade to Matilah is they will have more access to electives and a variety of electives, and we really want to work on enhancing that as we move forward. The thing that I really liked best was this thought of an advisory period, which did come up in 2014. And as we've talked about it more, it really is exciting to me because this is where you build in every day that opportunity to feel really student-centered and to bring in the opportunities for that social and emotional development. So you could imagine it, maybe it's like a 25-minute period every day. You might have like 25 kids that are assigned to that advisory period, and they would stick with that teacher who would be the teacher that bonds with them, that teacher's their advocate, that teacher helps them when they have difficulties. And the class period is not just a study hall where kids can just finish their homework. In fact, that's not what it's supposed to be. Through a viable curriculum, we would actually be providing the kids with learning opportunities when it comes to social and emotional development. So, we might show video clips of little vignettes of scenarios of things they might be going through at this age, and then create dialogues with them about how would you handle that situation? What would you do, when it comes to things like time management or organizing themselves. Part of that period might be having them get their backpack out on a weekly basis and their agenda book out on a weekly basis and helping them fill it out and keeping themselves organized. These are the things that they really need to work on that are particular to their age. Those are skills that we need to help them master, right? And then, team teaching again. So one of the things we've talked about as we're planning is we would like a block of classrooms where roughly the 160 kids in 6th grade are potentially in the same area where the 5 or so teachers that work with 6th grade are all together. That's going to really help promote the team teaching amongst the teachers, but also the feeling that they're a cohort and that they are working under the care and support of those 5 teachers that are running their classes. Now, we know that there are barriers here that are different than if you're in a different state or even in a different county. So, as Javier and Carol and I have discussed what we plan to do, we see that some of these components we're really going to be able to adopt very quickly, and we want to do so. So we can see that we can move toward an even more student-oriented campus. We can create that balance of both cognitive and affective development opportunities. We have exploratory classes, but we want to even offer more if we can. We see that we can put that advisory period in pretty quickly and that we can do the close proximity with the classrooms. When it comes to the interdisciplinary teams, those interdisciplinary units and the experiential learning approaches, some other states run their middle schools differently where they have like an 8-period day and they are able to, the recommendation in the research is to give teachers 2 prep periods, where one of the prep periods is to do their grading and their planning, but the other prep period is to meet with their team and to focus on these interdisciplinary units. We're not in a situation currently where we think we're going to be able to offer that, but we do think that we can certainly get the ball rolling. We can give teachers release time, perhaps on a monthly basis, where they actually do start to incorporate more of these type of units. And that's our hope and our goal. Again, with the block and flexible scheduling, we know that's a recommendation of the middle school concept. We have some distinct credentialing features here in California that make it a little bit difficult for us to do that. And so we'll have to really see as we see who the teaching staff is going to be as we move forward, we'll have to decide if we can manage some block scheduling or some single period scheduling and how we're going to balance that out. So if you don't know, I presented at the last meeting, but teachers essentially have two types of credentials in the state of California. They have a multiple subject credential, which is what typical elementary teachers have, and that means they can teach multiple subject matter, so history, science, math, English to the same group of students, whereas our secondary teachers tend to have a single subject credential, which qualifies them to teach one subject matter like over and over each to different groups of kids, right? So your typical English teacher in secondary teaches, 5 periods of English to different groups of kids. So as we look at who our teaching staff will be, obviously our current Matilaha staff, but also our elementary staff that moves up to Matilaha. If we move the 6th graders, we'll start to use our knowledge of their credentials to decide how we can best incorporate potentially some of that block scheduling, as was recommended as the middle school concept. So that's my presentation as far as the PowerPoint goes, but I did want to draw your attention to a sheet that we handed out called the main points of discussion, and I think I have it here as well. And mostly I've covered, or we've already covered, the first two things, but we do want to say that, we're so happy for all the parents who've come out today. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear what you're concerned about. We want to hear what you're excited about, and take all that into consideration as we move forward. But we also want to know that we've already heard you loud and clear. We know you guys have concerns. We care about those concerns, and we're already starting to address them. So obviously one of the biggest concerns is what we would do with CME. We know our kids really look forward to that trip in 6th grade. I know as a Miramonte student myself, I went to CME. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's Catalina Island Marine Institute, and it's the trip that's a couple nights that the students do in 6th grade. We see that the current 4th graders who may be the first cohort to move as 6th graders to Matilaha, we see that they would likely want to go on to CME as part of their 5th grade culminating year, if that becomes their 5th grade culminating year. And so we've already got a phone call into CME. They're already looking for dates for us in case this change happens. And we just want to, promise you and reassure you that we care about that, and we want to make sure that that happens for your students. We know. So we've had a lot of discussion with the 5th and 6th grade teachers about where we think CME would best fit, and you're right. Some of the reasons why we talked about leaving it in 5th grade have to do with the curriculum that it correlates with, but also one of the discussion pieces that we had was that most people really do feel that it is a culminating activity, right? A culminating experience of elementary school. And so it does appear at this time that our teaching staff feels that it should stay in 5th grade for both of those reasons. However, just because we're looking at dates for next year for the current 4th graders doesn't mean we have to do it next year. And that gets me to another bullet point that I have on here. I really think the best next step, should we decide to move our 6th graders to Matilaha, would be to immediately form committees on our site with parents, with teaching staff, and potentially with students to talk about how to best do this transition, right? We do care that our 4th graders feel really good about the transition if they're the ones to transition, and we want to talk about what would the culmination ceremonies look like if you're doing one for 5th grade and for 6th grade on a campus. Where should CME go, right? What year should it happen in? What other types of fun activities like end of the year parties? I mean, so much goes into a final year of elementary school that we would really want to make sure that we do it right for those 4th grade students, and we would, again, immediately work on doing so with the help of parents and student and staff input. It wouldn't just be one person deciding what's best for them. We would really want to take all of our stakeholders' opinions into account as we make those choices, make those decisions. So. Anyway, I think that's the bulk of my material. I don't know if the board has any questions or if we want to move back up to.
I think what we should do actually is stay here and let people speak, because I think it would be odd for us to be up there while people are down here talking. So why don't we just, I don't know how Kathy would be taking a list of people, or.
Can I say something real quick on that? I think David's plan was to turn this podium this way, and because all the mics are up there, and if you guys are going to be talking and interacting for the video feed, we do have a live video feed, if you don't know that. We probably should go back there. Sorry.
It was a good idea. You're talking to you guys. We're gonna get there.
David, could we turn off the projector? Thank you.
Hopefully we'll be able to see him. So we'd love to hear from anyone who wants to speak. The normal protocol is, I guess, Kathy will write down your name, but since we're up here and you're down there, we can kind of do the logistics after, I guess, right?
Or speak your name.
Or
into the
speak your name.
microphone.
You can say something utterly uncontroversial, like "good job," or anything else. Anyone? Or we can start talking about it now, and then if any of you feel like you have comments, sometimes that's how we get things rolling. So I think that's what we'll do. We can ourselves start to discuss it.
I do want to, on that sheet that Cheryl, you showed last, about the main points, what concerns have parents brought up? And obviously, I think one of the concerns is, are sixth grade students emotionally ready to be at a different campus? And I went around to some of the elementary schools and talked to the teachers who teach fifth grade and sixth grade, and I was surprised at how unanimously they felt that students were ready, that by the end of fifth grade, students are already going through emotionally and physically changes that are harder to address on a campus with second graders and fourth graders. And that was really helpful for me because, my youngest is 19, so it's been a while since I had a child there.
He's the oldest fifth grader in the district. It's really uncomfortable for us up here.
So I think it's important to know, well, what are those students experiencing? What do the teachers feel? And also teachers who have taught fifth and sixth, so they see the difference between the end of the year at fifth grade and the end of the year at sixth grade. And I felt really comfortable hearing their comfort level with the emotional aspect of a younger student moving to Matola.
One thing maybe Cheryl and Andy, you can talk about is, I know, and I think it's still kind of undecided if we were to make the transition, how to handle, at least early in the process, the relationship of the sixth graders to the school as a whole. Like, would they have lunch by themselves? You've already mentioned that there would be an area of the school where the classes for the sixth graders would be concentrated. I think that's part of your plan.
Right.
So, I think I've heard a little bit of, maybe kind of baby steps, in the sense of maybe have the idea that when we first do this, that maybe the sixth graders would have a separate lunch. I mean, I think people worry about bullying. They worry about, it's obviously different when you have seventh and eighth graders than you have sixth and eighth graders. And a sixth grader encounters an eighth grader, that's different than a seventh grader encountering an eighth grader. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, so Javier and Carol and I have definitely had these conversations. One of our thoughts was to try to keep the schedule the same so that to some degree the sixth graders could go to periods of seventh and eighth graders, like for example for electives, or in the case, for example, currently we have sixth graders who travel to Matola for first period and then get bused back to their elementary campus so that they can be in a seventh grade math class. So it was that rationale that led us to, we really need to be on the same schedule. But I think the discussion for separating them at lunch or integrating them at lunch can still be discussed. And potentially, I like a phase-in potentially as well. We do want to shift even the current 7th and 8th graders to have a more integrated experience at Matilaha. We were just having a conversation today that currently they do athletics in the gym, and when the kids are in the gym, there's a lot of mixing between 7th and 8th grade. But when you walk around the campus, the kids who are not taking advantage of that are kind of congregated into their 7th and 8th grade groups, which is natural because those are the kids they're in class with, and those are the peers that they know the best. But we would actually like to take this opportunity to do more things that are intramural sports, things like that, potentially class competitions or homeroom competitions, or maybe even, making teams of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders so that we really actually provide them opportunities to feel connected and to be connected in a really real way. So I think we're looking already at how are we going to proactively address really a nice integrated feel for all the kids, including, the current 7th and 8th graders that are on the campus now.
Any board members with questions or comments at this point?
I have a few comments, and I have mixed feelings about the whole thing. I think when I first heard about the concept, I thought, wow, that's really scary for 6th graders to go to Matilaha. And then I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, is it scarier for 6th graders to be with 8th graders, or is it scarier for 1st graders to be with 6th graders? And, I'm not sure. And then the other part of that is, just the gut feeling that I had, and I think a lot of parents have expressed to me, that, kids are growing up fast enough, and why do we have to have them grow up any faster and go to middle school? And, then I thought about that as well, and I was thinking, I think they are growing up faster than they ever have. And are we simply recognizing the fact that they are, rather than forcing them to do anything? I don't know. Still, I have some concerns, and the idea about dressing up for Caveman Day and Greek Day and Egypt Day. I mean, if the whole of Matilaha does that, that's one thing. But boy, I mean, maybe we live in a kinder, gentler place now than we did when I was a kid. But when I was in junior high, I don't know that it would have been a good idea for the youngest kids in the junior high to dress up like a caveman and have the older kids not. So, I think we really need to think about some of those things. I think as a board, it's kind of the decision, do we do it or not? I was watching the video of the last meeting, and we got into a lot of detailed discussions about, well, how is it going to work? And are we going to put these kids here? And are they going to go there? And what are they going to do next? And what teachers are going to be there? I think those are decisions that are going to have to be made by administrators and teachers over the course of the next several years. I don't know that we can micromanage that. So while it's nice to have some idea about what's going to happen, I don't know that we can really foresee all of those things. And if you don't know me very well, I'm the guy who argues against himself. So now I'm going to argue against myself. And
that was Zane. This is Thane.
And and I'm thinking, well, if we do move the 6th grade to Matilaha, what are we doing if we just have all the 6th graders together and in their own little group and not interact with the 7th and 8th graders? What do we accomplish? We might as well have just left 6th grade where they were. And so I hope we can come to some sort of middle ground where we're actually accomplish something and make it benefit those kids to get to know the older kids. And, one of the really, I hope you don't mind, but I didn't have any time in the last meeting, so I'm making up a little bit. But Matilahi is really special in the Ojai Valley because we have a lot of kids in the valley who go to private elementary schools. We have kids who go to private high schools. But a lot of those kids come together for the first and only time at Matilahi. And we have more students, I think. I mean, that's been my anecdotal impression. I think the statistics probably bear it out a little bit, but this is our one brief shining moment for the Ojai Unified School District in the whole valley. And are we really taking advantage of it? And that's why I really liked a lot of what Cheryl was presenting in terms of what can we do to make the Matilahi experience even better. I mean, I think it's great. And this is not a criticism on what we're doing now. I think it's great. But what could we do even better? And by bringing in another cohort, combining them all together, maybe this is a great opportunity to take advantage and say, all right, how, what are the advantages here and what can we do? And I think a lot of good ideas have been spelled out. Now, some of the obvious points here that the whole country and the state of California have moved to this model and we're the ones left out, kind of make me ask the question, because I think we're the only school district in Ventura County, right, that has the sixth graders as part of elementary school. So it makes me ask the question, and this is what I'd be interested in comments about. If we're not going to do it, why are we different than everybody else? Everybody else seems to have had a good experience with it. Ojai is special in a lot of ways, but is there a compelling reason that really makes us different than everybody else? Or is it just the natural parental feeling of this is scary, which is totally valid too. And I've had that feeling as a parent in the past as well. The first day of school ever, the first day of junior high, the first day of high school. It's a scary thing. But is it just that, or is it something more? And if it's something more, what is it? And is it special here? And is there a reason we should think of ourselves differently in that respect? Boy, I have talked a lot. I'm going to stop for now and let someone else carry on.
Well, before someone else does, one thing I think might be helpful is also to point out that if we were to decide tonight to do this, obviously the Earth doesn't suddenly come off its axis. In fact, what happens is then the administration stages to do this in a year and a half. So it's a long process, and there are a lot of decisions that have to be made. And I would assume, and I would ask, that the board be periodically kept abreast of the major decisions, things like which teachers will be making the transition and things. And so that there will be public input along the way in the course of the year and a half before we actually get there. We obviously have to make a decision to even get that rolling, but it's the kind of decision that immediately doesn't have any great impact other than presumably an article in the paper saying that we've decided to do it, but then a lot of groundwork goes on. So do you want to speak to that at all, Andy?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So certainly if the board does vote tonight to make the change, again, as Kevin just said, we're certainly not talking about the change being effective for next school year. It's effective for that fourth grade cohort that Dr. Knox mentioned. That would become sixth graders in the 1920 school year. For the next 18 months or so, we would be, that really would be the impact of this vote tonight from the most immediate standpoint is the number of meetings that would really begin amongst administration and faculty, and ultimately, as Cheryl also mentioned, pulling in staff, or pulling in parents and students. We would be looking at making hiring decisions in the near term because we really do want to get that faculty cohort on board early in the process. So that way they're able to be really important stakeholders in helping us be able to make decisions about how exactly we move forward with the concept. But there's no question that there would be many meetings over the next school year where we'd be bringing to the board and ultimately to the public the important decisions along the way. So as Thane mentioned, a number of administrative steps that would be taking place in the background, but it certainly would not be something where a decision is made tonight and the next thing we hear is when the parent handbook or parent mailing goes out in a year and a half. There'd be quite a bit going out to families throughout.
Seemed like, Shelley, you wanted to say something?
I have a few questions, actually. Mostly, I think, for Cheryl. One of the first questions is, I heard you tonight, you may have said it before, but I heard it for the first time, that with the next generation science standards, if upon adopting that curriculum, we may actually have another added cost to the district for 5th, 6th combo classes if we had to hire again the way we do now for math. There's that potential that we would have to do that
So
also.
we were very lucky when we adopted language arts that they had a K-6 curriculum that we thought was superior and that we adopted. But yes, we run the risk with both social studies and science potentially being 2 separate programs from 2 separate publishers because there will be limitations.
So there's the potential cost, extra cost to the
Potentially,
district.
yeah.
Okay.
To be clear, an extra cost if we were not to transition.
Right.
Right.
My other question is, I have this feeling that if I asked any teacher at Matilaha if they were student-oriented, they would say yes.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping you can help me understand more what this, on the middle school side, as opposed to subject-oriented, which I understand we really are single subject classes at Matilaha. What does it look like to be student-oriented?
So I would wholeheartedly agree that Matilaha is currently student-centered or student-oriented, as is Nordhoff, right? They do a lot of things to really to embrace that and value that. The difference in this model would be the addition of the advisory period, where the teacher would really take a small group of students, like 25 students, under their wing and really be there for them, to bond with them over the 3 years and to connect with them, to, like I said before, to be their advocate, hopefully the trusted adult that kid can go to on campus to share their thoughts, concerns, everything, right? Additionally, the direct, I don't know if direct is the right word, but the explicit instruction and discussion in regard to social and emotional development is the key factor that I think, creates more of an avenue for that student-oriented approach. We really want to look at the whole child, right? It's not just about how to get these kids to learn their academics. I mean, you hear me talk all the time about, it's so important to get our students to master standards, and I care very strongly about that. But in this model, it's balancing that with understanding that these kids go through really difficult things in this developmental age, right? They're in that identity crisis sort of stage in life. They want to explore a lot of different topics and a lot of different ideas. Their interests are different. And I think that's what we see when we're sitting on an elementary campus and we're, for example, looking at recess, and you can see the difference between what 6th graders are interested in versus 5th or 4th or 3rd graders. And the idea is embracing what they're interested in, what they want to learn about, what they want to know about, and really having valuable discussions with them on a regular basis and embedded into the program through that advisory period, for example. So that, I agree, we're student-oriented currently. This would be taking it a little further and really explicitly thinking about it.
So one of my follow-up questions, and I was going to ask it anyway, was about the advisory period. I've seen models where you have that same cohort and that same teacher for all 3 years, and where they have it as a single year. What are we looking at?
I personally would be leaning toward the 3-year model, but I also think that those are valuable discussions that we all need to have together, and also when we bring our staff on board. So, we are currently designing a vision right now of what we think is going to be best, but until we know our staff and who's going to come from the elementary school to join the Matilaha faculty, I think those discussions will then we'll be able to decide what are the pros and cons of either model and what do we think is the best benefit for everybody.
Thank you. My last question, or maybe my last question, has to do with time, and I brought this up in an email today. One of my issues with Matilaha is this age group, which I see as a very crucial time in life, getting out of school so early, and oftentimes without, because the Nordhoff and Matilaha schedules are different, there's not the older siblings home to to babysit, if you will, the junior high kids. And on the opposite end, oftentimes the junior high kids don't have the responsibility, which from the elementary school kids, I worry about adding sixth grade at that young age, getting out so early. So it goes back to that late start conversation we had. But also, I asked the question about after-school care, and I was curious how many sixth graders in our valley currently are on-site and after-school care, and what that would look like. And Andy, I don't know, you did answer my question. I just wanted everybody else to hear the answer.
Sure. So as Shelley said, she requested that we survey the current participation in after-school programs across the valley for sixth grade students. What we found was our largest, just so everyone knows, each of our elementary schools do run after-school programs on their site. It's either run by the PTO, PTA, or it's run by the rec department. So the rec department confirmed that on the two of the three larger campuses that we have for elementary school, the two that they operate, they're really only looking at about one student a couple times per week at each site is the sixth grade population in the after-school program. At Miramani, which is our largest overall program, and run by the PTO, they do have a little bit larger count. They were looking at around 4 on a daily basis, and then a handful more that were coming in on a kind of as needed or on a more sporadic basis. We reached out to the private care facilities in town and found that really, I think, especially as the programs over the past few years were built up at our school sites, that they really have become the predominant care center in the valley for students after school. So we are not seeing a very large population that currently is utilizing after school care in the sixth grade. We do know that certainly Matilaha currently has a number of extracurricular sports, especially available after school, that might be able to help fill that void for those who do need a little additional care or supervision. But certainly it is something that we'll be looking at and be potentially surveying parents and students to see if there's need. Miramani, and I'm sure the other schools would be potentially interested as well, but Miramani has already volunteered that the kiddos who would otherwise be in their program, they'd be more than willing to take those sixth grade families back in, even if it's at Matilaha. So we'll work with the other care providers to see a way that we can meet the needs, but obviously that's always our goal is, as we identify needs, we'll find a way to meet them.
Wonder too if we could keep the library open longer now that we would have a larger population. Of course, one of the nice things about this is you aggregate your resources, you got more students, you've got more reason to put the resources into the school, so you can do things like keep libraries open longer, whereas it's much harder among a bunch of different disparate elementary schools. One thing Shelley brought up that I think was brought up in our last meeting that maybe you can address, Cheryl, is I think in the course of exploring the middle school concept, you and administrators have identified some ideas that you're already implementing. Just to be clear, some, as I think Jane said, we're already, or maybe Shelley, I can't remember, student-centric. There are things in that list that obviously you look at it and go, well, what are you waiting for? And we're not, right?
Right.
I don't know if you want to speak to that, but.
I don't know if I can say much
Yeah.
more, except that I do think we are doing some
Yeah.
pieces from that list already, including experiential learning. I'm not sure if you guys do it anymore, but when I was at Matilaha, we did an Ellis Island simulation. You guys still do that?
Still do this.
Yeah, so, the idea here is that, and I get the concern, if you dress up as a caveman in your sixth grade and you're the only one doing it, how that might be difficult. We do really want to create a culture where it's fun and desirable and there's more of it so that you feel like it's okay to do it. We do see at the high school that kids have dress-up days and it's not embarrassing and the whole campus does it. So certainly there is absolutely potential to do more of it here and make sure that people feel really good about it. So
Well, even the Ellis Island one, they can dress during the period. They can go to, I mean, I know my kids brought their stuff.
And
They didn't
changed.
wear it, yeah.
I say that our biggest experiential experience happens in PD when they do the Winter Olympics.
The Winter Olympics, awesome. So we just want to do more of that and, you know, embrace those components because we know from the research that it is what is most valuable for kids in this age group.
Mike, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, you know, when I first heard about this, I actually wasn't on the board, and then I heard about it again when I was on the board, and my first question was, why? Because I really hate rearranging furniture. And that's kind of what it sounded like to me. It's like, we're just going to ship them over there, and then we're going to teach them there, and okay, what did we accomplish, right? And so my first question was, why? Why are we talking about this? What's the driver? I mean, are we just looking for something to do, or is staff like not busy enough? It was just like somebody's good idea and we're just going to ram it through? What is the point here? And the first thing I heard was Matilaha and program viability, and you know, and that's true. I mean, Matilaha, we're like one of the few districts where all of our kids funnel through a final singular termination, right? They all go through the same junior high, they all go through the same high school. We have a really unique opportunity to take all of our kids and meld them into one cohesive group as they age out of our system and grow up. And so I thought that was a pretty cool thing. I mean, keeping the programs viable at Matilaha, because we all know you go below critical mass and you start losing assets. And given that we're struggling for enrollment in this district, I don't want to see us lose valuable assets, and a unifying community building asset such as a common junior high and a common high school, I think are really important for us. So the idea of program viability was pretty cool. But, you know, I had to circle around and realize, well, what about the sixth graders, right? Because, I mean, I don't really feel like sacrificing sixth graders to maintain one extracurricular at Matilaha. So what about that? And I heard a lot of concerns about the emotional fragility of sixth graders and the magnitude of the change of going from elementary to a junior high. And I started doing a lot of research, and all the articles that I was finding all spoke exactly to what people were saying here, except they were talking about fifth graders. And what I realized as the more research that I did is that these issues are the same whether we're talking about fifth graders or sixth graders. What we're talking about is a change in paradigm, going from an elementary school to a slightly more adult junior high. The issues of moving fifth graders into junior high are exactly the same. The research out there and all the articles talk about exactly the same thing, going from a structured environment to a less structured environment, going from young children to more adult children, to all of these same issues. So that, coupled with the fact that we are the last one to do this, says to me that there's a lot of experience out there about how to do it and how to do it right. And that it does benefit the sixth graders, both by better integration with the curriculum and an opportunity to see role models as they move into the slightly less structured system. It becomes a transition period as they move into high school. So that I've heard that there are a lot of advantages. It's not just, well, it'll keep Matilaha healthy and it won't hurt the sixth graders. It's actually more than that from what I'm hearing, is it'll actually benefit the sixth graders. But there's a lot of things that need to be done right. It is a less structured environment, and they are moving out of a structured environment. And that's where I started to feel very comfortable hearing staff talk about the strategies that they can use to build that transition. Sort of the not isolation, but the slight separation of sixth graders to ease them into that population rather than throwing them in. We're not talking about a sink or swim change from what I'm hearing. We're talking about a carefully orchestrated and managed change. And then the final thing that I heard that got me so excited was this whole concept about reinventing middle school completely, and that this is an opportunity to completely change Matilaha into something that's much more 21st century. You know, we're revamping the facilities, and the idea of revamping the curriculum and the structure and the approach to education at the same time got me really excited. Now, it's true that we do nothing here but vote on policy and up or down, right? So we're not going to be the ones in the trenches doing these detailed meetings with parents and really strategizing how to really make this work the Ojai way. That means I have to trust staff. I can do that. I've worked with these people for years now, a number of years, and they care, and they say what they mean, and they mean what they say, and we'll be watching the whole time anyway. So, I believe that they will do the things that they're telling us that they will do. So I am more comforted the more we talk about this, that there's a lot of research and a lot of experience out there for us to draw on. Our folks are doing that. They're doing the research, they're looking at what's out there, they're bringing best practices in, and they're not going to do this casually, and we're not going to do it fast. We have the time to do it carefully and to do it right if we do it. So that's kind of been my thinking. It's evolved from what is the point here to this could be a very exciting opportunity for this district to reinvent that transition from elementary to high school for all 3 grades. So that's kind of where I'm hovering at this point.
I'll say, do you want to say
I
more?
was just gonna
I would
point out
like
that
to
I think
hear, yeah,
that we have speakers.
We have speakers, and here we are just babbling away. Please.
Are we on? Hi, I'm Sandra Hansen. I'm a veteran teacher from Miners Oaks at the moment, and I have taught fifth, 6th grade, and at the moment I teach 6th grade. Thank you for all that you do up there, and I appreciate all the deep thought that you're putting into this idea. I know that we are in declining enrollment, and I would want to be sure that this would be a move that would enhance our enrollment rather than exacerbate that. And one of the thoughts that I was concerned about is that many parents in particular, not necessarily their children, but many parents in particular are really concerned about the move to the big middle school. And I know at Sunset they have, a K-8 organization. So I wondered if you might even consider keeping one of our elementary sites with, a K-6 configuration for those students maybe whose parents weren't ready for them to go to the middle school, or maybe are really not as mature and weren't quite ready to do that. We would have that opportunity to maybe keep some of those students. I know I've had students from my 6th grade that didn't go to Matilaha that went to Sunset specifically because their parents weren't ready to put them here. So I wanted to throw that on the table. And I also, I think it's a great move. They're going to do really well. Matilaha is a wonderful place to be. As a 6th grade teacher, in the beginning of the year, if you asked me in September, I think, I don't know if they're quite ready, but right now they may go. I'll bring them over. I'm bringing them May 15th. But there is so much to learn now. The curriculum is so dense and intense, and it takes hours and hours to really deliver and plan the curriculum for the 6th graders between the math and the social studies and the science and the language arts and the art and all the other things that are poured at us, that to have them have a single subject teacher or a team of teachers that's working together to really disseminate their education, I think will be a much richer opportunity than what we're trying to do with them now, because our expectations are off the charts. I mean, if you see what we're really asking them to do. My final concern, and I hate to throw it out there, but I'm concerned that, if we take 55 kids from Miners Oaks and 55 kids from Topa Topa and 50 kids from, that makes our elementary school smaller in student body. And so does that lead us to, oh my gosh, we have to once again talk about that school closure issue, or what are we going to be doing to make our schools still viable? So I'm a little concerned about that, and I don't know if keeping one of them open with the 6th grade there, we'll keep them open as well, so all of our students have a neighborhood school. So anyway, thank you, and keep
Sandra,
thinking about it.
Can I ask
Yes,
you a quick question?
certainly. Mhm.
You mentioned that you've had students go to Sunset from
3.
3 this year?
Not this year, but last year.
Last year you had 3. Is that Would you say that that happens often each year, or was that an anomaly? Or?
I have only been teaching here for a couple of years, and I think that we do lose a little handful, a few, well, we've got people here. Do you guys lose students to go to Sunset or to another where they don't go to Matilaha? Just my three.
Thanks.
I think it's, thanks, Sandra. I know that I know that we've talked, clearly the elephant in the room is, that we have declining enrollment, and we've talked about the idea of what would happen in the elementary schools with the pulling of the sixth graders over here. And I know we don't think that we're looking at closing elementary schools in the near future as a result of that. And I don't know if you want to talk about that too, Andy.
Sure, so this was one other item that we touched on at our last meeting, so I believe we do have the handout in the back. It's just a one-pager. Obviously our entire district is dealing with the reality of our continued decline in enrollment. What we identified last meeting was really that, let's go back to Myers Oaks example. If we feel that a 260 student K-6 is viable at Myers Oaks, pulling out 40 or so of those kids, which when we settle in at that 160 number, that's more of the cohort size, not necessarily 55, 60, 70. If we're pulling out, 30 to 40 kids and we're going from being a 260 student elementary school to 230, does that have an impact? Certainly. Obviously, every student, that's going elsewhere has an impact on the culture and on the viability of that school. But I don't think it actually substantively changes the analysis as to whether or not we maintain the current configuration, which this board stated their desire to do just a year and a half ago, to maintain all 5 schools open. So certainly there's an impact, but it by itself would not be the sole factor or precipitating factor to necessitate us reducing from 5 elementary schools.
And I think we expressed that we did not want that. We did not want it. We wouldn't move the 6th grade if we felt that forcing something else to happen.
Correct.
And I think the fiscal neutrality of the move also speaks to that. I mean, that baked into it is the idea that, effectively the district finances as a whole, which currently are supporting the whole hive, so to speak, would basically remain the same, if not be slightly enhanced, right?
Correct.
How about the idea, it's hard to not always embrace every possibility. It's an interesting idea to have one elementary school with a 6th grade that you could then potentially accommodate people who just didn't feel that they wanted their kid to come over to Matilaha as a 6th grader. Is that anything you've thought about before? I hate to put you on the spot. But.
Yeah, I'll share some thoughts, and then Dr. Knox, who has direct experience with that, can as well.
Can I throw another question in there to combine, because I think it's part of the same question?
Sure.
And that really goes to the handful of kids that might be going to Sunset. And I just don't understand, and maybe that could be part of the question, the thought process of not wanting your 6th grader to be with 8th graders and then sending them to a school where there are 8th graders. So if that's part of
that's a tough one for me to answer, the rationale there. So I might punt on that one as far as why a parent would avoid Matilaha to still be with 7th and 8th grade. As far as the idea of potentially having one campus that would maintain a K-6, that's a very good idea. It's a reasonable one. It's one some other districts do have. So to clarify a point that Thane made earlier, which was a correct one, we're the only district in the county that has a 7-8 junior high exclusively and forces all 6th graders to be at elementary school. There are a few districts that either have obviously K-8s. There's also some districts that have, as I already alluded to with Dr. Knox, Simi Valley Unified is a district that has the option at some of their sites to be able to have 6th grade stay behind and remain at the elementary or go up to middle school. So it certainly is a tested concept in other sites. The challenge that we face here, though, is that same issue of our current challenge of housing all 6th graders across the district is the challenges with curricular alignment would certainly exist and actually potentially be exacerbated by having only one 6th grade teacher or 1.5 who remains at that site. So certainly there'd be that challenge. We'd continue to have combination classes between 5th and 6th, so there'd also be that added financial component that we already experience with having to pull out the 6th grade or the 5th grade for various aspects of the education. You know, I also would think from a parent perspective, it might help those parents at that site who struggle with the idea, but I'm not sure how many parents who might be attending a different school in the district would decide that they felt that the fear of having their kids with 7th and 8th graders warranted the upheaval of transitioning to an elementary school for only a single year as a 6th grade cohort and then immediately transitioning back to that school. So I'm not sure that's best for the child, and I don't know realistically how many parents, when you only have 40 or so, 45 to pull from, would end up opting for that option. So those are a few initial thoughts. Again, it's a tested concept that works in our districts, but I think it would be a real challenge for us, given the size of our sites. Once we also talk about, again, the curriculum side, NGSS and the benefits of being at middle school or at Matilaha, where we actually have science labs, you know, that'd be a challenge at the elementary school as we move further down the path toward NGSS. But again, Dr. Knox, you can share your perspective.
Let's try to keep it truncated because I also want to hear from more people.
So I agree with everything Andy said. I did work out in Simi Valley where 6th graders have the option there. At the time I was there were 21 elementary schools, and after 5th grade, kids had the option of staying in 6th grade at their elementary site or going to the middle school where they had 3 6th through 8th grade middle schools. And there were really big challenges there, 2 that I'll speak to. One, in any given year, we had no idea how many 6th graders would choose to go. So one year, for example, at the elementary school that I was at, we had a really strong connected cohort. They all chose to stay. We had 3 full 6th grade classes. The next year, it was a different dynamic amongst the kids. The vast majority wanted to go, and we had to essentially lay off or transfer 2 of our 3 teachers off of our site to another elementary school. So it's a constant battle of knowing the stability of your campus and moving teachers around. Additionally, in many cases, the kids who really struggled socially and emotionally are the kids that stayed on the elementary campus. And I did not think that was in their best interest. For one, they lacked that peer role model of having their same grade level peers that could sort of model the maturity. And as well, when I think about what we could offer in social and emotional support through the advisory period and some of this curriculum we've talked about, I would think that they would benefit from the model we're talking about having at Matoha. So.
Another speaker. I'm assuming that's the well of speakers.
My name is Sherilyn Wheaton. I'm a parent at Miramonte. And so I want to take you up on the offer to say good job. I think I'm pretty excited about this change. I think it'll be great for my kids when they get to be that age. And so we have, educational benefits, we have financial benefits, and I just want to point out one more is that when you only have the school for 2 years, parent involvement, PTO, and getting to know who are these people, how does the school go, where can I help, when you're only there for 2 years, it's really hard to figure out who you are and figure out how you can help, and then you're gone. And so also, my kids are 2 years apart, so there will be 1 year when they could both be there together and I could have all my energies focused to one place. And I think that's pretty common amongst, to have, but no one's gonna have 2 kids there in 7th and 8th grade, not no one, but fewer people. So I think that there's a lot of benefit in social capital amongst the families and the community in making the move.
Thank you. Did you tell us your name for the record?
Sherilyn Wheaton.
Thank you.
Sherilyn, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was thinking earlier, I'm with, I think it was Michael, my first feeling was like kind of putting my heels in, and I'm not so sure about this. And every time we discuss something, it kind of pulls me more the way I thought I wasn't going. And I think that's a huge element, is parent involvement, because all the research shows the more involved parents are, the better the student performs. And that's a really hard thing to do at Matilaha with just those 2 years. And also that age when students are like, I really don't want you here, Mom. Mm-hmm. So if you bring in that 6th grade where they have less of that feeling, and then students are kind of used to having parents around a little bit more. Those teachers that are coming over are used to parent help. It'll be, I think, nice to add that to the Matilah model for the current staff. You know, Javier, there was a year when I was the only PTA member at Matilah when my son was in 8th grade. There was no secretary, no treasurer, no vice president. That was really hard. That's really sad. And it would be an exciting opportunity, I think, for Matilah to have more parent involvement. If we make the move, I would really hope that would happen.
Another comment or another speaker? Speaker, thanks.
My name's Maggie Rogers, and I have 6 kids. My daughter Caitlin graduated Nordoff last year, and my daughter Peyton is actually a 7th grader at Matilah right now. And I have to say, anytime your kid goes to middle school, it's scary. It doesn't matter if they're a 6th grader or not. But so I just have to say that. And then I initially got up here to speak because of the thought of an after-school program. And when your child goes to middle school, parents are a little bit cut off. The child has to become more responsible. And I think it would be an excellent opportunity to offer an after-school program with a credentialed teacher to do tutoring in there and help kids get that good head start, because it's really the start of 7 years. And I think if a child gets that good foundation in 6th grade, or even if they need it in 7th or 8th, I think it would be a really good opportunity that a lot of parents would gladly pay for, because I'm sure a lot of them use the, you know, like the different tutoring companies around here. So it'd be really good to have it at our school, and I would, as a parent, would like to see that implemented.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Any comments on that?
You know, I'll just make this one comment. The one thing that speaks to is the centrality of resources, right? If we get it all in one place instead of being separated into 5 or 6 different schools, you get that critical mass. Not only do we preserve the programs that we have, but other things like this become a little bit potentially more cost effective. This is a really good idea.
My name is Nikki Crawford. I'm a parent at Miramonte. I have a 4th grader, and effectively it affects her. I also have a current 7th grader here at Matilah. My question was asked earlier in regards to, Mr. Ruff, you equated it to short sheeting a bed at the beginning of this conversation this year. We may not close the school, but what fiscal impact realistically are we looking at for each elementary school? What kind of cuts? I know that it was talked about Matilah, if we did not increase the numbers here, would have to reduce the principal staff down to 1.5. Well, you can't cut person in half. So do you lay someone off? Do they work a 40%? What are the realistic cuts that we're looking at? And granted, I'm done. I have 2, and you know, we're going to be out of elementary school, but I have coworkers. I have children that I took care of because I did daycare for 12 years in the Valley. What realistic cuts are going to happen to the elementary schools if we don't close the school and we keep them open? Miramonte PTO works really hard to fund a lot of extras to close the gap. You know, the shortcomings from the financial impacts of what's happening. Also, just as a side note, the kids that I have randomly talked to, kids that have graduated, that are currently ready to graduate from high school, just asking them, because my first notion is, yes, it's great, the curriculum's awesome, that would be a great, you know, from the teacher perspective, and working in the classroom, collaboration and easy curriculum, not that it's easy, but easier, is all fantastic. But the kids, you know, as the parent, I put in my heels because it is scary. I was the first graduating transition for, sorry, running out of time.
It's okay. Take your time.
The
I talked way too long, so you can.
When Ventura made the transition from a K-6 to a K-5, I was the first sixth grade class. I will say they did the block period. I survived. I think I turned out okay. I will say I was exposed to things that I don't feel I should have been or was prepared for as a young sixth grader. Talking to children who have gone through school, graduated Matilaha, graduated from high school, I asked, did you feel like you were ready to go to middle school when you were in sixth grade? No. Do you think you should, and asking the fourth graders, just at random, different kids on campus, do you think you'll be ready to go to, are you excited you might get to go to middle school at Matilaha? And no.
You can keep talking.
I will say the culture, as rose-colored glasses on, the kids are going to miss out on those dress-up days. I know that the Ellis Island thing is kind of a school collaborative, but I will tell you that there's not going to be a sixth grader that wants to dress up like a caveman if they know that their older counterparts are here. I think the confidence building that they get being the big fish in a little campus is good for them over there. I want to say by February, they're probably ready to come here, but before then, there's so much growth that happens. I've been able to witness this on campus, and I'm just a parent, but seeing specific children who are not quite ready to deal with certain aspects of what I think a middle school campus brings, allowing them that extra time is, I think, important. The curriculum aspect and the if we can really make that work, I think it would be a good thing. But I really fear for the elementary schools as what big cuts are we going to have to make in addition to make that happen? Because you can't take away 60 kids from a campus, and on paper, at the district level, it looks okay, but what does that mean for each school? And that's my question. Thank you.
So first to the financial point, I think we just covered it, but I believe that there is no immediate fiscal impact. And when you said I said something about a short sheet of bed, I think what I was, in some context, because anytime we're up here talking about money, the idea of a short sheet of bed is, you pull it up to your neck and your feet are sticking out, and you pull it down to your feet and your torsos, and we have limited resources in the district, but as it's an important part of this for sure, because we just went and the last time we were sitting here was actually on the subject of whether we should close an elementary school. So it is something we obviously take very seriously, and we are deploying resources through Measure J to all of our elementary schools, and Andy is very sophisticated in a lot of areas, but I think he is most sophisticated when it comes to financial aspects of this district, and that's one of the reasons why we chose him as our superintendent. So, I know you've already said it, but I think it's quite clear that the moving of the sixth graders to Matilaha does not have any necessary effect on the schools out there. We have community schools. Our feeling is that they are a great asset to this community. We hope someday that the prices will come down enough that we could actually attract people to come to our community because of our great community schools. But even if not, they are currently being used by people and greatly. And what we really love about it is that this is a community among our elementary schools where people can, if you live over on the East End, if you want to go to Miramonte, you can do that. If you live over at Miners Oaks, but you want to go to Topa Topa, you can do that. It's a place where people can really find their niche, and we think it's valuable and we want to maintain it. And doing this at the middle school and having a middle school with the great curriculum, we think is consistent with it.
Andy, wasn't there something that you created that showed what would happen at each elementary? Like the effect of losing it? It was just the numbers? It wasn't on their administration or
Correct. We
secretaries?
did not look at staffing at the elementary on that document. So again, the document that Jane was referring to was the one from last meeting that I referenced earlier, where we actually break down current enrollment and then using the current kindergarten cohort, projecting out what schools might look like if sixth grade were to go away, move to Matilaha, and then again, 2 years from now, so not just simply removing that number, but also projecting in incoming kindergarten cohorts. Look, Nikki, I certainly hear that concern. This whole board hears that concern as far as the impact on our elementary schools. We heard very clearly, as Kevin mentioned, it was now 2 years ago when the 7-Eleven committee completed the report, and then about a year and a half ago, this board took up that topic. I can't say enough, I do not believe that this move is going to be the cause for a school closure. When you ask about staffing decisions, we have, we just to kind of let you guys peek behind the curtain, we're looking at budget throughout the year, and we have meetings among our leadership team throughout the year as we look to what, the needs are for the current year as well as into upcoming years. But our really core staffing period is really from, beginning January, getting really strong in February, and February through March, April, and even actually at our next board meeting next week will be the kind of the culmination of that whole process. So when I provide the numbers of what things might look like at Matilaha 2 or 3 years from now, I caveated every way I could that is not our actual staffing plan if this doesn't go through. We did not want to try to make a pure scare tactic as to if the board doesn't take action, then we know that our administration is going to be reduced by X number. Likewise, we don't have even a hypothetical of what things might look at the elementary level. There are so many variables in the overall school funding formula that we don't have a staffing plan for 6 years from now based on so many of these uncertainties. But we certainly are doing all we can to make the numbers work. We're certainly doing all we can to keep people whole. And I do believe that this move, again, is really cost neutral to the district when we're looking at long term.
And in terms of the elementary, really, unfortunately, because of our declining enrollment, we're pretty bare minimum. So it's not, if you have one custodian, you're not going to lose one custodian. I would hope that we would keep them at the hours they were keeping, but that's you working with your administrative leadership team. And again, like Michael said, we have to trust that you'll do what's right for each site in terms of the staffing.
My name's Kate Spiva. I'm the 5th, 6th grade teacher at San Antonio Elementary. Uh-oh, I'm already.
So sorry. So sorry.
All right, I'll go sit down.
Thank you, though. That was good.
That was a great speech, I know. No, I really wanted to thank Dr. Knox and Mr. Cantwell and all of the board for all of your hard work and thorough consideration on this. As a 5th, 6th grade teacher at San Antonio Elementary, I feel like I have a unique perspective on all of this from the standpoint of being both a 5th and 6th grade teacher. But also from working at a campus that's of similar size to the cohort that you're talking about for a 6th grade level. And I want to speak to a couple of the beauties of that. When I look at San Antonio, I see already the academic benefit of the 6th grade moving to Matilaha. It's very clear and direct. As Dr. Knox pointed out, there isn't a lot of room for collaboration there. I am the only 6th grade teacher there right now. So the curriculum is vastly different from the 5th grade curriculum. There is no reasonable way that I could actually teach both the 5th and the 6th grade curriculum, specifically in math. And as we look at these concerns, especially with social studies and science coming up, I really see the huge gaps in the completely different areas of study and focus in those areas. So it's very clear there's a huge academic benefit, but I also see a real value for a social benefit. I look at our unique cohort of 160-ish kids, give or take, on any given year, and I see this amazing community that's been built within it. And this idea of all of the teachers looking out for every single one of those kids speaks to me. Having 5 teachers that are dedicated to those kids is unbelievable. And I know that's already happening at Matilaha. I know those teachers are dedicated every bit to these kids. But I see it uniquely at a campus where we have those kids that we are focused on, and it is not just our 30. Those are our ducklings, every single one of them. And so in the mornings, it's not uncommon for us to be out hugging the kindergartners and expressing what we're looking forward to at the same time as those sixth graders. And so we build this tight-knit community. And I see the younger kids keeping our older ones younger, and I see our older ones helping mature our younger ones. And the possibility of that happening at a middle school level in those really, some of the most formative years that they're gonna have, and some of these years that are gonna really guide and direct their future is substantial in my eyes. And so I just wanna thank you for looking at this and for considering it, because the benefits are so clear in my eyes. I've been excited and dancing around since I heard about this, because it really does feel like the right movement as we go towards that next generation model. So thank you all for your hard work on this.
We have one more in our well.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Usher, and I didn't really plan to speak, so I'm going to try to speak slowly and clearly and make my point. I feel like I wanted to share with you a little bit of background. I spent about 2 decades in a middle school environment in which we did have advisory groups. And I did see many benefits in those years that I was involved as an advisor. I think it's more difficult sometimes on parents at the age of middle school than it is of children. I think children are more resilient than we give them credit for. And I remember when I was pregnant with my first child, and a woman recommended to me the book Raising Cain. And the 2 psychologists in this book said that most of the parents that came in, the mom said, I don't know what happened to my son. He was so great and so sweet, and now I don't understand him, and he doesn't understand me, and I'm frustrated. And it's just a natural transition where young people are no longer looking towards their parents, or looking towards their peers. And when as advisors, we can be a mentor to a child who isn't looking toward their parents sometimes, maybe it's just that one person, that advisor, that can touch that child. Also, some families are busy, and some children don't have role models or parents or families to go to, and it just takes one person that they can connect to sometimes, a good mentor that can change their whole lives. So it's that opportunity when these children are changing to have, to work with different people, not just families. They're making transitions. I think the thing I see most in working in a combo class, I work in a multi-grade 3 through 6, I think I can really see it, a big difference between the children. Even in the novels, I read a 6th grade novel to the whole group, and my younger kids just didn't get it, and my 6th graders were all taking off in places that we wanted to go, but I couldn't do that with, in that situation. I see them, they're ready to go. They're so sweet to the younger kids, but they're in a whole different mindset. And I like the idea where they can look at to older peers, and I like the idea of them mixing with 7th and 8th, and having these opportunities to do things that they don't get in the elementary level. I hope that makes sense. But I really do like the idea, the model of the middle school and the advisory, and I thank you for looking at that, and I hope to see good things come from that. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
Any comments, or should we go to our next speaker? You kept us just full, just in time.
My name's Nick Smith. I've got a daughter in 2nd grade at the moment in Miramonte, and I've got another daughter that should be joining there next year. My question, and apologies if it's in all this documentation, if something that relates to it, but you mentioned that OUSD is the only district at the moment with this current model. Are there any examples of other school districts that are going through or have been through this transition recently over the past sort of few years? And if so, were there sort of any issues to begin with, any problems? And are there any sort of tangible kind of good things that have, can you sort of say if any of the schools have improved educationally? Any tangible sort of figures on that, whether improvements have come straight away, or whether it's taken time, or whether it's had a negative impact to start off with?
So the original committee that met in 2014, they actually had a school superintendent and principal come from a school that had recently made the change. I don't know, Shelley, if you can remember specifically. I actually spoke to a gentleman last night who was the principal of a middle school when it added 6th grade. And I didn't specifically ask that question, but they had a school that also offered the option of K through 8 instead. Like that was, you could do K through 8, or you could do K through 5, 6 through 8. And he had moved from, I think he was high school and middle school, and he said that the students who did the K through 8 were poorly served at the high school when they got to the high school, that it was not a good model for preparing students for high school. But I didn't specifically ask him about the positives, but I do remember being at that meeting, and those two people who spoke about having recently switched over to the middle school model had the whole room sort of a Twitter of like, oh, wow, if that's going to be the difference, it's not just, like Michael was afraid, we're not just moving them, we're moving them for a purpose.
Yeah.
But I don't know specifically whether there's any sort of data on improved scores or changes in.
Do you have particular concerns?
I think many of the concerns have kind of been raised, and you guys have really talked through a lot of the kind of sort of concerns that I came into this meeting with. One other sort of follow-up question, I guess, would be, what is the primary driver to this change? Is it kind of the syncing the curriculum, or is it more the fact that there's a drop in enrollment? If there wasn't a drop in enrollment, would we be having this conversation? Or
We have had this conversation over and over again. We had it in 2014.
Okay.
When we did have a drop in enrollment still, but not quite as drastic as it has become at this point, and did decide to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very curious. The conversation that happened in 2002, I don't know much about, and why it didn't happen then. So
We heard from the principal, actually, of Matilaha, whose name I will not forget because she left us saying we had a golden opportunity, and her last name was Golden. I got it like 10 minutes later. But my sense of this, and I don't have the total history, but it's very much driven by pedagogical concerns and by, you've heard a little bit of it, but our former superintendent, who is a lifelong educator, had been a superintendent in a huge school district in Chicago and had a long career as an educator, as a teacher as well. He left, and when he left and transitioned to Andy, the last thing that he really felt that we should know as a board is how strongly he felt that our educational environment in Ojai would be improved by doing the transition. My sense, and I personally have, none of this is driven whatsoever by anything other than the idea that this is an exciting new idea for our school district, and the best, if I'm inclined to do it, so I'll say that. And my sense of it is that it's a good decision for the kids. I have a 3rd grader who will be, second in line, I guess, to make the transition, and I'm excited about it because I see, as Michael said, as we aggregate the resources, we just have more opportunity for more. The world we live in now is prismatic. It's not linear.
Yeah.
So the more opportunities to go into a class on one subject or take an elective on something else. And actually, I think as a 6th grader, getting used to that kind of learning and being in, having more exposure to different ideas throughout the school day, it's going to set them up better for high school, where hopefully they'll do better and get into better colleges and things like that. But at any rate, I think this is driven by the idea that it's the right thing to do from an educating standpoint.
I would like to add, I think it's a good question, and while I don't have any data about it, the data point that I think I do have about it, that didn't make sense, but I'm not aware of any school district who has moved their 6th grader to a middle school who said, wow, we made a mistake, we're gonna move them back. It seems like once they've changed, for whatever reason, they've kept with it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the question.
I would like, Kevin, I think it's very helpful that you have a third grader and Shelley has a fourth grader. Her daughter would be in that, that group.
Sorry.
Oh, you do? I thought you had a fourth grader.
She's a sixth
She's a
grader.
sixth grader, boy.
Yeah.
That's, you have a
I'm-
third grader.
Third grader.
Okay.
Yeah.
She
I have a
jumps,
sixth
yeah, she-
grader and I'm looking at this going, so I want to really know, what are you doing next year? What can I look forward to? That's my, yeah.
another speaker.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Zimmerman. I have a second grader at TOPA and a seventh grader boy here. In 2014, I spoke when you had the committee and I opposed moving the sixth graders over here. I do believe now that the academic portion of it makes complete sense. The athletic portion of it makes even more sense. The fact that sixth graders right now do not get to play team athletics at the elementary level, and they are way capable of it and wanting to do it. So we're relying on club teams to do that. But the social part of it is the biggest concern. My son was fine. He was ready to go. I think in February, March, they are the sixth graders. I'm like Nikki. I went to sixth grade at Balboa in Ventura, and I came here for seventh grade. What you are exposed to in sixth grade as an 11-year-old to those 14-year-olds should not happen. I mean, it really shouldn't. It's crazy. And I can only imagine the amount that social media now plays into this, because we already have issues with our kids in seventh grade, dealing with online bullying, drugs, sex, pictures, all kinds of stuff that I think goes under the radar. And I think what needs to happen is a possible committee, if this is to be moved, to deal with this portion of it. The Boys Empowerment or Integrity Workshop and Girls Empowerment Workshop is great resource. My son's doing it for this year. But what's going to happen when they don't get that in sixth grade? Are they moving that over here in sixth grade? Are they getting the beginnings of it? They're going to be exposed to so much more if they're not segregated in a way here. And that also isn't fair to them either, to be segregated. I had the block schedule. It didn't work so well because it did actually let us be with eighth graders during recess and lunch, but it just kept us in a core group of classes at Balboa. I don't have an answer. I just want to say that that's my biggest concern. So now my daughter coming into here, that's going to be my biggest concern, is her being exposed to those eighth grade girls. What kind of social things happen, especially with phones and technology and Facebook and apps. That's it.
But just to throw out a devil's advocate kind of question, I mean, because of all that ability to interact without physically being in the same spot, doesn't that also potentially mean that kids are having that exposure even without physically being in?
They are definitely, but they are also not equipped to handle it, and no one's talking to them about how to do it, who to go to, what happens when you do this. I mean, you can get threats. I mean, parents are trying to take screen captures really quick before the person deletes it or private messages it or whatever, or these apps that you can't get at. And the administration can't really do anything about it because usually it's happening off campus or off hours, but it definitely plays into that social dynamic in school when you've got 11-year-olds and 14-year-olds together at very different levels developmentally. I mean, you can look at the seventh grade class, your daughter's in it. You can look at those boys. My son's 13. He has not hit puberty. He is standing next to a kid who might only be 3 months younger than him and is completely hit puberty and completely socially just different. And that's only within 3 months or 6 months age. Never mind going from sixth grade to eighth grade. With Nikki, I did ask my son, I ask kids all the time, would you guys have been okay going there? My son goes, oh my God, not with the eighth graders this year. And he's in seventh grade. They already skirt around each other at school and say stuff on social media because they're not in person. It kind of goes hand in hand. So.
I think it is I'm sorry, are
Oh,
you
yeah,
finished?
no.
I think it is something, Carol and Javier, that would need to be addressed. I have actually heard this, sort of the same argument with fifth grade parents feeling that way about sixth graders on campus. Like, what, if they, Topa Topa, they go to see me in November, and a lot of times they come back kind of paired off, you know, I have a girlfriend or whatever, and the fifth grade, fourth and fifth grade parent. So I think it is, as a district, a concern, and I know it's, you know, I had 3 sons, or I have 3 sons, and each class was different, you know?
yeah.
One child had an amazing class, I wouldn't have worried about them as 8th graders with 6th grade. Another child didn't have a great cohort, you know? And boy, if they had been the 8th graders, when 6th graders, that wouldn't have been so great. So it is something that, I mean, I think that's where my major concern is too, is the age, and how, whether we separate them or how we integrate them, or, you know, teaching parents how to, you know, maybe, I mean, I had a conversation with Shelley last night. I didn't let my kids have a Facebook account until high school. They hated me. But I just couldn't imagine I just couldn't deal with that. So maybe helping parents figure out how to help their child.
And I definitely see the value of the PTA thing, because yes, 7th and 8th grade, you kind of come in as parents with all the schools coming together, and you don't know a lot of the parents sometimes. You may have known them from sports or whatever, but you don't know them like you do your 6th grade class that came in and stuck tight. So I can see the value of having that, but I think it also needs to make sure that the school district or the administration here will then integrate the parents into it a little more, because right now it is very hands-off, and that is on purpose, I am sure, and I don't mind it at all. My son's great. I just think that it needs to be addressed as a collective group when something does have problems, or someone, I mean, Cheryl, you know, we worked through some things with some of the 6th grade boys. We had a very difficult class at one point. But they needed to learn how to communicate, and they were learning that in 6th grade in a smaller environment, in a safer environment. I don't know if they necessarily will get that here, if they moved with the 6th, 7th, 8th.
Thank you.
So.
You know, I'll say that I think we all would agree and have to agree that the safety of our students is by far the most important thing that we do as a school district. So as we said at the beginning of this, you know, we make a decision tonight. If we were to decide to do this, there's a 1.5 years of staging that's going to take place, but the safety of our students and the recognition that this is a new thing with 6th graders at Matilaha is going to be absolutely a vital part of that planning, I assure you.
Can I also say too, you know, I think this idea of a student-centered campus that we've been talking about in the middle school, I think we have to look to that model to deal with that, because what I'm hearing from a number of people is it's that first semester. It's that entry place, right? You don't want them to move in to this place and feel totally isolated or on their own. And so the idea that you're, in my mind, and Cheryl, correct me if I've got it wrong, but a student-centered school adapts to the student. It doesn't ask the student to adapt to the school. And the model that the more traditional junior high model is, here's the classes, get your butt in it and study, right? And so that's what excites me in terms of the reinvention of Matilaha as a middle school, is that we will have the time, first of all, to help folks, kids, get integrated into the system, and with advisory periods and potentially other stuff after school with the shorter hours, we can offer more support. And because we have all of the instructors in one place, we may have a little bit more flexibility to do that. But I think it's really important to bring up that transition period is key, because it sounds to me like it's going to be a very important focal point if we do this. It's not just to throw them in and say, wow, they're shorter 7th graders. They're not. They're different, and we would have to build a curriculum that acknowledges that. And I think that this student-centered concept is what would allow us to do that.
We have another speaker.
Hi, I'm Elisa Duclos, and I have a 4th grade student at Topa Topa and a 7th grade student here at Matilaha. And I feel like I'm playing a ping pong match in my head now, listening to everybody with all their
You're
comments.
Dane Whipple.
I think all
Yes.
of you have done a better job arguing against yourselves than I've ever done, so, yeah.
I have to admit, when I first heard about the prospect of the cohort moving over and the 6th, 8th grade middle school idea, I didn't like it. I felt really nervous, mostly because I didn't want, my daughter will actually be part of the transitioning 2020 year, I suppose, if this goes through. And so mostly because I didn't want her to miss out on the fun things that have been the culminating year of elementary school. The See Me trip, the different Greek days and fun special things that the 6th grade teachers try to do for the students. But listening to everybody and the things that are going on in our district, it seems to make sense, and I think it could work out. I think it could be a good thing. I'm starting to like the idea. I did ask my 4th grade daughter her idea. How would you feel about moving over to Matilah? And she's scared. She's scared of it, even though she has a 7th grade brother. He was excited toward the middle to end of his 6th grade year about moving on to junior high, because I feel like at that age they're really ready to move on. So I'm not sure if she will feel that way when she gets to 5th grade. But speaking to what Kelsey was saying earlier too, I do worry about some of the things that the older ages or middle school years encounter that weren't ever an issue at an elementary school level. Having drug dogs on campus. I remember the first day my son came home and said, there was a drug dog that came through the classroom, and oh my gosh, and so those sort of things that our younger students aren't seeing, and it's a sort of a whole new level of maturity that jumps out at them really quick, I think, of having to understand things like drugs and social media and bullying and peer pressures, that I would hope that the advisory idea of having somebody that's there for them would really work through. I think that would be something that through parent committees and everybody getting together to discuss would be a huge plus for the idea of a younger student moving forward into a middle school system. So I would really hope that would be something we could push with, but that's really what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Elise.
Thank you. Thank you.
It sounds to me like we'd have unanimous approval if we moved the kids in January.
Hi, my name is Amber Stogo. I am also a parent to a 4th grader and have great concerns about many things. Most have been brought up. Mostly the idea of these young kids mixing with these older kids. I came to Matilah as a 7th grader. I was in fear daily of being not molested, but a boy pinched my little butt at my locker every single day while I was there. And now you don't have lockers, so that's not an issue. But that was as a 7th grader, and it was frightening. I would leave my classroom to go to my locker instead of going to locker at breaks, because I was deathly afraid of this big red-headed boy who bothered me every single day. I worry for my own daughter, who is the oldest in my family. And so I worry for her on those levels. It's not being addressed. The curriculum sounds wonderful. The idea, it all sounds great. How these 8th graders mash with these 6th graders is very scary to me, being that I lived it and I lived it here. Also, I worry about See Me. Yes, we're taking care of it. If they don't have a reservation this year for 5th grade, they won't go in 5th grade. There has to be a plan, a specific plan. I agree with Thane. You're not going to get little 6th graders when the 8th graders and 7th graders are going to laugh at you dressing up in their Greek when they have an amazing day at Topa Topa where all the teachers dress in their Greek stuff and all the students, and they run around the playground. They're not going to do that when there's 2 bigger grades that are looking at them like, what are you doing? You know, like, I agree with that. It's not really a possibility in actual life. In a make-believe storybook, oh, that sounds wonderful. Kids are very self-conscious at this age, and maybe they bring their outfits and they put them on in class, and then they take them off and they shove them back in their backpack, but it's not going to be this fantastic thing that Mr. Ondo and Ms. Ferranti and Mrs. Mahler put on. It's this amazing experience they have, but they also have the Getty trip, and they have all of these events that they are all looking forward to with like, oh, we get to do these things and we're the biggest kids. And now it's like, oh, well, you didn't ever get any of that, and we'll try to fit one or two of them in for you. So it seems like you're going to have your sixth grade year. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of other major wonderful things, but I feel like our kids might get lost in the shuffle. And then I also heard somebody bring up these little, when school gets out and then there's not that break time until the high schoolers are out. Shelley, you brought that up. Or then the other elementary schools are out, and then there's these 11-year-olds walking down into town in this mass flood with all the other kids. And now what are all the, you know, like these 11-year-olds with, what are they supposed to do? Like there's a different level between when you're 14 and you can walk through town and walk home, or you're 11 and your mom doesn't finish school until 2:45. So you have that half hour, and you're just kind of wandering with these big kids. And I'll be done, but like the scary big kids.
Thank you.
What is our, what's the transportation situation looking like for Matilaha in terms of buses after school?
So just so everyone knows, we did actually just recently, for the first time in about 2 decades, purchase new buses for general education transportation here in the district. We have 3 new buses coming in over the summer, and so we are going to be looking at not waiting until the 1920 year, but looking at next year, the ability to expand routes both morning and afternoon. So we're working through that right now, but we're very excited that we do have 3 brand new air-conditioned buses that will be used for gen ed home to school transportation.
But just FYI, Kevin, there is no busing downtown. So anybody, that's basically where you're talking to. Currently, there isn't. So all those kids who live anywhere in a 2-mile radius, there's nothing, no transportation.
We have another speaker in the well.
I was trying to delay.
Well, I would like to just comment that I would hope we would make absolutely every effort not to take away any trips, any activities, make sure that no kids are lost in the shuffle of the transition. I think that would be very, very important. One more thing.
I wanted to make sure that when it's decided that site-specific, the graduation, if it's district-wide or site-specific, so that then the parents of each site can really rally to figure that out, or if it's district-wide, because if it's site-specific, like things that were lost this year, the Thomas Fire, like, you know, during that December, some schools made it up and some schools didn't. So then we have to decide if it's district-wide, we're gonna do it one way, or if it's site-specific, okay, Tokyo, you can do it how you want, Miramani, do it how you want, or if it's gonna be everybody gets everything, or, you know, that was the other question about like promotion, medium.
I advocate for site-specific.
Well, certainly I think CME will be district-wide, right? I mean, we're not going to try to, whatever we do, I mean, when I say district-wide, I mean, there will be a CME solution for every single school. It's not going to be like, hey, good luck,
Right.
Miners Oaks.
And to clarify, I
Or
already
TOPA.
do have dates for CME for next year. They're not my favorite dates, but we have secured dates. So we're not, if we do want to move forward, we are going to make sure our kids who are current 4th graders, next year as 5th graders, go to CME. And then the way I envision it is site-specific, where a team of people come together and talk about, you know, parents sitting around the table, teachers sitting around the table, and potentially students sitting around the table saying, okay, what do we want to do for our 4th graders in their 5th grade year to make it great? And I have every reason to believe that we would be able to make it great in lots of ways.
this is a little off the subject, not
Oh,
off
you
the
want-
subject, but I have, from the very beginning in 2014, have said, is there any way we can make that first sixth grade cohort move after Christmas? Like let them have a half a year as the big kids on campus as sixth graders, and then they move over. I mean, I know the nightmare for the teachers to move, but if there's any way, we could even just look at it, and it would say, we can't do it. But just to look at it and say, well, let's prepare for the summer as if they're coming, but then they don't come. I mean, I know there was that school, I think it was in Simi, where the school became unsafe, and like they ended up moving the entire school in 2 weeks' time. So it's like, surely we can move 2 classrooms from that school and 2 classrooms in 2 weeks. I just like to look at the model. It's like, so you'd have, next year's fifth graders would have a half a year on campus as the big kids doing some of those special things before they come over. And then the current fourth grade, they'd have that half a year being the big kids on campus before they became the sixth grade the next year. I don't know. I know, complicated, but just look at it.
So my request, if the board does take action tonight, which sounds like there likely will be a vote, that not be a contingency of the vote. We'll look into it, certainly. I will absolutely look into it.
Sure.
My name's Steve Sharp. I currently have a fourth grader at Topa. That was quick. I attended Matilla 15 years ago, roughly, so I remember it very well. And I'm not going to touch on all that stuff, but I do agree with some of the parents. There were some challenging times. But my questions to you are, my fourth grader right now has 0 to very little homework. So if you're talking about transitioning them in 2 years, I believe 7th and 8th have quite a bit of homework, right? Yes?
They do have.
My 7th grader has
Quite a bit of homework, okay.
Has homework, certainly.
Okay, so 6th grade, I'm not sure, but
Sixth grade does have home, just so you know, they kind of use that sixth grade year to transition. So sixth graders, as opposed to the rest of elementary school, are getting homework on a daily basis
So to transition from
Right.
4th with little to none to 5th, I mean, I guess you gotta go quite a bit, and then into 7th with a lot. I mean, that seems like a pretty quick transition for the education curriculum that they're working with right now. So I think that's something that they're gonna have to adapt to, but could be a little challenging.
So to just speak to that a little bit, I think that we need to have lots of homework discussions, quite frankly, in this district, both at the middle school, the high school, and the elementary schools. But keep in mind that what we're looking at currently is really actually taking current elementary teachers and moving them up to be the teachers that work with these sixth graders. So if we have some sense right now of what the appropriate threshold of homework is for sixth graders, it's going to be those same teachers who already work with those kids that are going to be deciding what their homework should be in sixth grade when they're here. So I sense that they're going to really be able to keep it pretty much as it is now. But I hope as a school site, they'll address homework holistically and talk about the workload and how it relates to the students and address any concerns or issues that parents or students have currently.
Okay, and then...
And let me throw something out that I'm thinking of, Javier. I would think, I would think that we would have to maybe have a slightly different approach to homework when kids are with multiple teachers, because those teachers don't now all know what the homework requirements are for each other, which is much different than a sixth grader who has a singular, person who's giving them the homework. And it's easy to say, but it's actually something that, that's sometimes difficult, is to get teachers to communicate and, make sure that they're not overwhelming kids. So that would definitely be part of this transitional discussion.
Absolutely.
One more thing. I know you guys try to look into the future as much as you can as far as moving kids around and making it work number-wise, but, you can't predict the future, but it's not to say that there could be a time where, it is affordable for people to move up here and we do have more people moving to the valley, or people have, there is a generation that has more children, so by the time they get here, are you going to have room for everyone? Say that all the elementary schools, do have a full elementary school full of kids, and they come to Matilaha at the same time. I mean, are we going to be overloaded at some point if that were to happen, and now you're going to expand the school? Or, I know you can't predict it, but that's kind of like my industry. I work in the water, and everybody didn't think we were going to run out of water, and now we're running out of water, and we have no backup, and we're looking for plan B, and it's kind of late. So I'm just wondering, could there ever be a point where we have too many students at Matilaha?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we were looking at this back in 2014, we were assuming student cohort sizes of around 225, and wanting to maintain flexibility up to 250, which would mean about 700, 750 students, which again, Matilaha actually had just about that number in the past. But I do believe that the conversations then were also talking about the potential need for additional classrooms to absorb that space, to make that space. And we do have the physical space on this campus, although our administrators and faculty may struggle to think that's true, but we do. But really right now, again, what we're seeing, we have 5 really solid years of those student cohorts around 160. And so we know at least for the upcoming decade that that's really where we'd be looking. For us to go back up to 700, we'd have to have like a 30% increase in overall enrollment. If that happens, then hey, the capacity at Matilaha is the least of, that's a great problem to have, and I'm certain that we'll be able to address it with the things that were thought about just a few years ago as potential facility needs. But that'd be a great problem for us to have.
As long as we fix the water issue also.
Yes.
And we're leaving that to you.
Yeah. All right,
Well,
thank
and you have the possibility then of having a K through 8 maybe somewhere.
Lots of possibilities would open.
I don't want to repeat everything, and I really think this is a lot of great discussions happening, and I want to thank everyone for actually expressing their concerns, because I think it's really valid. I think the one thing I want to say, next year I would have had a kid go K through 12, so we have a junior, we have a 7th grader, and we have a 3rd grader. So really my perspective on a lot of these issues actually has shifted as having a kid gone through. I think science, extracurriculars, and sports are huge factors and would really benefit a lot of the kids coming here in 6th grade. I think we're one of the only school in the county, so when our basketball team at Matilaha goes and plays against teams, those kids have played 3 years and our kids haven't. And it really, wrestling, cross country, soccer, basketball, volleyball, a lot of these kids will have access to that, and not all of them have access for their parents to drive them in club sports and get this. So I think that is really important. Similarly in music and in science, I think that it will be very beneficial. So a couple of things I hope that we can incorporate in the idea to make this a wholesome experience. The career pathway classes that are offered at Nordhoff, is there any way those can really be integrated more into Matilaha? That could be performing arts, that could be dance, and that could be in science. I know that that would be very important for these guys to have a sense that that is something that I can do now, and it can be a high school class, and I can continue, and possibly a college credit for it. The other thing I really want to address, and it's sort of funny that it came to this point, but we have been talking about this at Topa Topa PTA. We've been talking about this at Nordhoff Parent Association as well. And the cyber stuff, the technology, the social paradigms that are shifting, they're happening as we're speaking, and we, I think as parents, have some sense of it, but I don't know anybody that has a total handle on what's going on. And I don't think that the teachers really have a handle on what's going on. I don't think the kids have all a handle on what's going on. So I think that really working that in, not just with the counselors, because when the child has an issue and the counselors involved, it's almost too late, as these things are happening every day on a moment basis. And the worst part of this type of interaction is it doesn't end. You actually have to physically remove the device from the kid. It happens at night, it happens not at school, it continues if you're on vacation. So really, and I don't know that anybody is equipped to really deal with it. And I would love for there to be actually a model, and this is kind of is more important because sixth graders are coming on, but I do think it's something we have to, as a society and as a school district, really engage, where we should have discussions with parents. We should have discussions with teachers and what they think is happening. Or, you know, I mean, under the table texting happens during class. So maybe there is ways of checking in phones. I mean, I don't know what the answers are, but I do think it's a huge part of it. Whether it's in sixth grade at an elementary campus, whether it's a 6, 7, and 8 here, it continues in high school. And I think giving the kids the right tools to learn how to deal with it, to say to somebody who's harassing you over text, to say, you know what, good night, I'm done, thank you, to be able to tell the parents that this is happening, or to be able to talk to in an advisory period, that will be huge, because I think that it's important for kids to have valid connections with adults that they trust. And simultaneously, a lot of kids are going through very similar things. And every household that we know that have this age group kids, similar things are being discussed. And parents really feel very isolated, I think, because some of this stuff is hard to talk to people you don't know really well. And I think it would be really important to really almost form support groups. Maybe the PTOs can be helpful, but not in a didactic way of so-and-so specialist is now going to come and give you guys a kind of an overview of what dangerous things, but really it's just like, what are you experiencing? And then really maybe form groups where kids can talk to each other about what they think is going on. And that is one aspect of it that I really think it should be planned in to the transition, involving parents, students. The other thing is in the groups that hopefully you guys can have, really to ask some high school kids to be maybe part of it, to ask some 8th graders to be part of it, because they really have a lot of, in the social aspects of things, have a lot of experience. And we'll say, you know, it would have been nice maybe to have Mr. Gard has an after-school class on Fridays. And I know that for some kids, and for I have kids, very different kids, and they've had very different experiences. But for my son, it was huge to be able to hang out with Mr. Gard on Fridays because he didn't get invited to walk with his friends into town. So it's kind of actually really important for Mr. Gard to have the garden club because he hung out with him and that was very important to him. And these things are very specific, and I think Javi knows because he has daughters going through the school, but I do think that it would be nice to have sort of different scenarios available. Maybe it's not daycare, but maybe it's homework club. Maybe the library is open, so it's not feeling like you're under supervision, but you are. And you know, the tutoring can really be built into it. And the advisory teacher can really, they would know what is going on. You would know if a lot of kids are having problems with math or social studies, or maybe they need English help. That's where maybe we can also involve the community volunteers into it. The mentoring idea could maybe happen at here, starting in 6th grade. Then hopefully we can kind of carry that through the high school, and because similar problems do repeat.
Thanks, Sansa.
Would anyone else who's on the fence like to speak?
While you're coming up, I would just like to say, and I wanted to say something when the topic came up before, but I don't want us to just drop this topic of technology. I think maybe there's something we can do to shine a light on it, that maybe there's something the board can do to provide resources so that the administrators and PTAs and PTOs and teachers can really address the issue. I don't think we can get Mark Zuckerberg to come and testify here, but you know, I think there's probably something we can do to provide some resources that would help, because yeah, it's only going to get more complicated as time goes on.
So my name's Catherine White, and I've been in the district about, 25 plus years, and principal of Miramani for the last 18. And I have a few things I just want to say, and it's not that I'm on the fence about this, but just some things I think I could offer to this. I do have a wonderful 6th grade group of students. I don't have a desire to send them on at this point. There are definitely a few that could probably go on and they do just fine. I'd also have a few fifth graders I could send and a few fourth graders I could send and maybe even a couple of second graders. I have some very immature sixth grade boys that I would be a little worried about being at the junior high school. And I know I also have some very small sixth grade boys who I have parents that are very concerned about them being with these really big eighth graders. So I think that's a consideration for some of our parents. I've written a lot of notes while everybody's been talking about things. Well, I could offer this and I could say that. I'm not a big junior high school fan. I never have been, and it's not anything to do with our junior high school at all. I think we have fabulous teachers. But I do think that 2 years is a very short period of time for kids to be in and out of the school. I think that having 6 different teachers a year for 2 years, I think it's hard to make connections. My youngest daughter was fortunate to have been here when Mr. McCune was here, and I don't know, maybe some of you remember him. But she had the same teacher. She had Mr. McCune for 2 years. And she made a connection with the teacher when she was here for that 2 years. And I think that was really special for her. I can't say the same thing about my daughter, who's now 34. I do think that having a 3-year program at the junior high school is going to benefit all kids at the junior high school, not just the 6th graders, but also the 7th and 8th. I was on the configuration, it was actually called, it was the configuration committee, right, Marilyn? Was Marilyn still here? Was she here? Oh, she's not here. She would remember that. And I think that was in 2002, somebody said. So that was a very long time ago. And we did study different configurations for school. I went into that thinking, I want a K-3 more than anything else. And I came out of that thinking, no, that K-3 doesn't really work because there's all these transition issues that happen when kids move from school to school and families move from school to school. And we looked at doing K-8s. We looked at doing 8-12s. We looked at a lot of different configurations, and ultimately we walked away from it all scratching our heads, not knowing what to do, so we did nothing at that point. So, we have looked at a lot of that. I will say one of the things, though, that we did, was in the evidence that we read, the research, was the parent involvement at the junior high school level, and that was that with those 2 short years and the age of the kids, that parent involvement did drop off. But in the schools that had the K-8 models, you didn't see that drop off. You saw the parents stay involved all the way through 8th grade, because I think the environment is just very different. You've got your child's kindergarten teacher there and all of that. But again, I think that if you moved our junior high into a middle school model, that also helps with that too. Again, parents will be more involved. They'll get to know your staff and your administration, and then feel more connected. So I'm going to jump around and look at my notes real quick. I've heard a lot of discussion about the kids having, because they're so grown up now, they're so much more mature, and that's a reason to move the children from 6th grade into the junior high school model. And I happen to disagree with that. Hank Bangser and I disagreed with that topic when he was here. And I think that now more than ever, connections are important for kids, because I do think there's a lot with social media, and the kids are, I think they've lost some connections with adults, and sometimes even with their families, because of the fast-paced life that they're living in social media. And so I think just the opposite. I think that they need more connections now. And so again, if you have 3 grade levels, and if you have what has been described as the middle school model, where the kids have a homeroom teacher, and in that homeroom class, you potentially even have that teacher for 3 years. I hear that, and I think that is awesome. That is something that I would like to have for every child. And if the 6th graders don't go to the junior high school, I would want that for the 7th and 8th graders as well, to have the same person for 2 years in a row. I'm the performing arts coordinator for the school district, so I can tell you I've watched what has happened with declining enrollment. My children were fortunate to be in the district at a time when we had a large enrollment and they had a lot of offerings. And now I've experienced as the performing arts coordinator the things that we've had to cut, and classes that we've had to make much bigger at times to fit all the kids in, because there weren't enough for 2 classes. So I do see moving the 6th graders to the junior high school is helping the overall big picture for our 7th and 8th graders as well, because they will have more offerings for all the kids then. I was writing in the columns and all over the place here. Let's see. Oh, another comment I was thinking I should probably share is that, there are a lot of parents that aren't here tonight that I think also have strong opinions one way or another, and I think that doing surveys is always a good idea. And I would suggest that if the kids move to the junior high school and become a middle school, that the middle school survey their parents after that first year, or even halfway through that first year, and say, how's it going? Just be really just blunt with the questions you ask and get that feedback so that you can get that back to your staff, and you can, sometimes there's just perceptions out there too that can be easily corrected with the parents if you know what the perception is, or you know what you need to address. And I think that's probably enough. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
I thought about something, and that is the parent-teacher conferences, for example, and we don't have them in junior high, and I think that's something that in a 6 through 8 level would be really important, because especially in 6th grade, kids are not necessarily talking to their parents, and it would be nice to have, even if it's a 5-minute, 10-minute one-on-one with the teacher, even if it is in a period designated that this is the week we have parent-teacher conferences in the afternoon, if you would like to sign up. So somebody who might not need to sign up doesn't have to do it, so you can actually do it but give the parents the option that you don't meet with your child's teacher when there's actually an issue or you're complaining, but actually really do meet with them at least once a year to sort of check in with. And some of those social issues might actually be addressed in those as well, which would be really helpful.
Thank you for bringing that up, also. I think that's a great,
I just thought about it.
yeah. And it kind of makes me wonder if that advisory teacher couldn't take on that role and be the communicator with the parent more than just that one time, that be a regular part of what that advisory period looks like.
Yeah, and especially, some people might really not need it, but I
Right.
think that for some people, it might be important,
And you don't know that you don't need it until you talk to them and find out you didn't need it.
Yeah.
So you should talk to them anyway.
Kids are very different, so.
Yeah.
Carol, is that, sorry, Cheryl. Hi, Carol. It's a little bit we worked out where we said, well, people are going to get tired, I'll do my Carol Cheryl thing. Cheryl, can you speak to that? I will say, and we've talked about it in board meetings, I call me a Pollyanna, but I was surprised that there weren't parent-teacher conferences at Nordhoff. I mean, it just feels like, maybe we don't have the resources, we don't have the time to do it, but I just think it's just great, because the reality is that you don't know, as Shelley says, what you don't know until you sit down with somebody and go, oh, wow, I had no idea.
So the typical secondary teacher has up to 180 student contacts that they have every day. So that's what makes it logistically very difficult to run parent conferences like you would in an elementary school. I do think the advisory teacher becomes the avenue to be able to do that more easily, for example, on a middle school campus, because that one person would potentially only have about 25 kids that they're responsible for, meeting with those 25 parents and conveying to them anything that they might need to know about what's going on during the school day. So I think that the avenue could be opened. I do know of one high school that did parent conferences differently. They had an open night in the gym where all the teachers sat at tables, and basically it was just a free-for-all. Parents came over a period of a couple hours and just got in line and waited to have an individual conference.
How Villanova does it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's the Villanova model.
I know of other high schools that have done it too, so I don't know, I don't have a sense of how well that works or doesn't work, but I think that the options are out there to explore to do something like that. But I definitely think with the advisory teacher, that opens up the door to make it more feasible and more meaningful. So I'd like to see that happen too.
Are there any board comments, or should we vote?
I think it's time to vote.
Yeah, I think it's time to vote.
Okay. So let's,
entertain a motion.
yeah, let's formally address what the question is.
I think just sort of a statement before we vote is, I mean, I still think there's a lot of questions, right? I mean, there's like, how are we gonna do that? Or what would happen? Or how would this look? And what about the kids who aren't ready? And, but I still think that you can't start answering those questions until you know what's the end game. I mean, where you're headed.
I agree, and I expect ongoing, board reports and meetings with the community as we go iteratively through these different aspects of how this will be done if we approve it. The question before the board is to approve moving the 6th grade to Matilah beginning in the 2019-2020 school year. Does anyone want to move?
I'll move to vote on that. And I think just in a quick comment on that, I think the one thing that tonight has made more clear than, it could be made is that there are pros and cons. But I think that there are problems if we vote one way, there are problems if we vote the other way, and we just need to decide what we think is the best for our students overall, considering both sides of the issues.
So there's a little gap between your moving. You want to do it again?
No, yes.
Give us that momentum. It's like doing your ABCs.
I will firmly move to vote on whether the 6th grade should be moved to Matilah for the 1920 school year.
All those in favor of
Wait,
moving.
you need a second.
You need a second.
Sorry, I was gonna do that. Yes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of moving the 6th grade to Matilah in the 1920 school year, that is the 2019-2020 school year. All those in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Unanimous. Thanks for all your input. Meeting's adjourned.
And now the work begins.
Exactly.